What's going on YouTube? My name is Mr. Cripwood, and today I'm going to be bringing you my first impressions of the 4 new gods in Smite 2. Now before we get into the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and if you'd like to keep up with any future content, I will be leaving a link in my Discord, to my Discord and my Twitch in the description below. Now, the first god I want to talk about is Agni. He saw a lot of good quality of life changes, plus a really interesting change to his passive. He's definitely gonna be a lot more of a nuisance now than he was in Smite 1. One of the biggest changes being that his primary damaging ability, has way farther range now. So at those early awkward stages from 1 to 3 or 1 to 5 in Smite 1, it was really awkward for him to clear simply because his main damaging tool didn't have enough range. So he had to get into harm's way by using his dash on the wave and then using his 2. Now it's not that much of a since this move has so much more range on it and seemingly a wider hitbox. His clear has become all that much stronger and his poke game is a lot better. Another big change that they introduced for him is kind of the scuffness on this dash or on his stun on his 1. Before, if in Smite 1 it was kind of like slightly off like this, it wouldn't detonate the bigger circle. And so you would miss out on some really high CC moments when trying to do combos on people who are moving. In this game, it's not that much of a problem. It's still a tad bit scuffed, but at least if you hit the corner of the ability at the very edge, it'll still blow up. Another big thing that they introduced for him is his passive now. Other than the tick damage coming off of his 2 and his ultimate, if he gets a kill, his passive is basically unlimited for a short amount of time. So he can burst down somebody and still do a lot of take damage. It's a nice little change. I don't know how relevant it's going to be, considering the fact that if you do manage to kill somebody and it's outside of your ultimate, the rest of your kit might just be on cooldown. So while it is nice and probably better for those late game encounters, the overall usefulness of it just seems a little negligible. And then I think I thought that was the last thing, but I forgot. When he hits level 5 now, when you get your ult, you don't have to wait for the first for your charges to charge all the way up to 3, and you're starting off at 1. Now, in Smite 2, you immediately get access to all 3 ult charges. So the second you hit 5, you can do a lot of damage fairly early. So couple that with the tick damage passive, he can really change the tide of a fight just by hitting level 5. Up next, I want to talk about Geb. Now, Geb saw a lot of amazing changes. Also, he does introduce a new concept of the game called aspects, which I will cover in a later video, and what his particular aspect does again in a later video. Geb saw a lot of good changes. First of all, his passive Hard as a Rock back in Smite 1. He used to only get you couldn't crit him as good as other tanks because naturally he had crit resistance. Now he only took 65% damage from critical strikes, so crit gods were played very difficult into him. 2 other aspects has been introduced to his passive. Now he can't take more than 20% of his max HP from one attack. He also decreases enemy gods' basic attack damage by 5%. So hunters are going to have a very difficult time dealing with this god, as well as he still keeps the critical strike bonus damage taken decrease. He still keeps that, and he has all these extra things that make him very tanky against hunters. So people who are complaining about people doing way too much auto attack damage, or people who are complaining that it was really hard to fight into auto attack gods in solo lane, this god is going to be very, very strong into them. And there's another beautiful thing about his passive coming in his 3, his Stone Shield. Before, it used to just be like a little health shield that he put on his allies. It's really nice because it cleansed CC. So if you timed your shield right, you can cleanse somebody from getting stunned, rooted, all that good stuff. And now, the person who gets shielded by this also gain your passive as Geb. So not only do they get this massive health shield, but you also become tankier as well. So he's going to be a very, very terrifying support to play into, especially on a hunter who's meant to be played aggressively. The other thing that they did change with his one, his little rollout move, is that it still does knock up, but as you can see this little circle here, if you reactivate the ability again, instead of pushing them away, you will jump into the air and land on anybody who's in that cone and do a knock-up instead. And both the knock-up and the pushback are, they do this basically the same amount of damage. So if you're ever having those instances where you were fully charging your one and Smite 1, and then you hit this mode, now you can stop from accidentally pushing the enemy god into basically a safer position, and you don't have to try as hard to push them back into your team. Now you can just have the knock up. The caveat to that is that you still do need to let this charge a little bit. Once it becomes yellow, then you can do the little knock up. So there is still a little bit of skill involved in that, but if you're not entirely confident about hitting the pushback, now you have the knock up option. That's very nice for some. His 2 and his ultimate are basically still the same. They did change one of the biggest changes for his ultimate by making it do base damage as well, so he can still kill with his ult, but it is still a very huge AoE stun. And it still does damage based off of their current health. So this ultimate still hits just as hard. The 2 is still basically the same. It does have a knock-up on it. If you use his aspects, it will take the knock-up away and do a little AoE circle around him, but for the point of this video, the 2 does do more damage the closer you are to enemy gods, but the knockup will hit them at any point. So if you do it from here, it'll do a little less damage, but if you hit it closer up, you see it did 225, now it's doing 277. So it does do more damage when you're closer. So keep that in mind when using his 2. Up next, I want to talk about Mulan. Now, a couple things with this god. Right, first of all, I love the fact that they went with this design instead, because this used to be an alternative skin from Smite 1, and you had to use like gems to use it. And while I did appreciate the other design, this is kind of more true to how she would have looked like during that time, given the fact of her lore. So just off of that alone, design alone, it's already amazing. Now for the character. The character itself is still a little weird, right? She does come with a few new things in her passive, basically getting her own particular item that can either reduce the cooldowns of your next non-ultimate ability, or a consumable that grants 5% bonus XP and 20% movement speed. She does gain that, which is really nice for her team, but the main things I want to talk about are her changes to her abilities. The biggest things being her ultimate and the secondary passive that all of her abilities gain. So if you played her in Smite 1, you know that her abilities gain different effects depending on how mastered your abilities are. To gain mastery with those abilities, you just have to hit them, right? Before, the one just gained extra, you gain extra attack speed after using the ability, and then you get a third strike on this ability, basically giving you extra damage. The 2 just gives you a heal, and then it can strike twice, and the 3 basically just, you gain protections, and you can dash towards walls. The biggest changes are the third things you get once you reach mastered. These are permanent stat boosts that she will keep throughout the remainder of the game. The 1 giving you permanent attack speed, the 2 giving you permanent strength, and the 3 giving you permanent movement speed and protections. And they're kind of minute. They're like 5% for each, roughly. But 5% each is still a pretty huge deal. It's a pretty huge deal. And then on the 1, instead of 5%, she gets 10%. So instead of 25% attack speed, you get 35% attack speed. So your DPS can potentially go up a lot higher, especially in conjunction with your 2. The other thing is the ultimate. Now her ultimate do gain different stat bonuses depending on whether or not your abilities are mastered. So it kind of puts a bigger emphasis on hitting your abilities every single time, because the biggest thing that I'm kind of concerned about is the mastered sword, because now it allows you to turn up to 90 degrees during the forward dash, so allowing you to basically turn around or snipe. I had to really test that myself personally. However, if it's what I think it is, it basically stops you from being able to turn the other direction. However, that is something pretty nice, because back in Smite 1, if you used it, you turned around during the ultimate and shoot it behind you. Now you can actually turn in front of you, which is nice. If you master the spear, whenever you hit the knockup, it adds 3 seconds to the enemy god's active cooldowns. So if you time your ultimate right and hit the knockup, it could stop people from cycling through their abilities a little bit longer, making it to where it's easier for you to win team fights. And then finally, if you master the bow, you shoot the projectile faster. A good thing that they did add to this is that now you gain protections during the duration of this ability. I don't know if it was back in Smite 1, but it really didn't feel like it. Here, it's a whopping 30% extra protections for both physical and magical, which is absolutely insane. So now she can actually use this ultimate and be relatively safe while doing so. And plus now it's a good dive ultimate because now you're tanky. So she did gain a lot of things. She does seem a little bit underwhelming as far as testing goes. Probably further videos are going to be needed for this god to see exactly where she lands. But she definitely is a welcome addition. Finally, I want to talk about ullr. Now, ullr didn't see really too many changes. He really only got like two really good changes, and that both being in his 3. Now, let me go ahead and show you what that looks like. Because this one's going to be a little bit harder to show. So now, when you have your 3 out in either your bow stance or your axe stance, whenever you use an ability, a little field is left on the ground. And depending on which stance you used it in, that ability will gain different effects. So, if you use the 3 in the bow stance, and then you change stances, as you can see, it changed and now it becomes this little field that slows. And I believe it does also do a little bit of tick damage. I'm not entirely sure, but it slows nonetheless. The one that you want to use for damage is the leap. So after you use the leap, again, it leaves a little field. If you change it, now it does a little explosion that does bonus damage. So kind of really helps with his one-shot potential, especially since he still has the passive to where when you use an ability in another stance, your other ability cooldowns and the other stance are reduced. So it can help him with his burst potential, because before, correct me if I'm wrong, ullr did require a little bit of skill, and it was difficult to hit his harder hitting abilities. And even when you did so, it felt as though sometimes they didn't die completely, or it felt like you weren't doing enough damage. Unless you're going against somebody who's extremely squishy or doesn't have any type of lifesteal. Now he has added damage to his kit and added utility to his kit, therefore making him that much more of a threat. So ideally now you can shoot this, switch stances to slow them, hit them with the stun, and then dive in before switching back, getting a lot of damage off. Or you can just go straight into the leap with this. Hit them with the axe once you get close, and then switch stances, getting a lot more burst, and then finishing off with your 1. Making it a lot, to me, making it seem comboing with this character feel a lot more fluid, and it just gives him a lot more options for engagement rather than just doing the typical just stun and hope for the best. So it does help him quite a bit. That's basically everybody. All 4 gods seem pretty decent. It's hard to believe. Ullr may seem a little bit on the weaker side. Him and Mulan, but ullr's burst potential has always been up there, especially in a one-on-one fight. So he's going to be very useful, probably as a jungler instead of a primary hunter. And then Mulan has always just been a solo laner, and her whole job as a solo laner is to soak up damage. And now she has the means to do even more damage and gain permanent stat boosts, which can kind of help her in regard, but it's still kind of yet to be seen. Agni and Geb, though, they're both really amazing additions, and they both seem to probably be the biggest winners coming into this game. But let me know what you think. Let's hope to see the next god that they bring in, Aladdin and Kabrakan, are going to be just as hype as these guys. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching, and y'all take care.